Right, so everybody knows there is now a new appraisal system for all educators, and that new appraisal system is called the QMS. And of course, you all know what comes, and it's stipulated in the Collective Agreement 2 of 2020. So we're not going to go into all those legal aspects. I want to jump straight into the work plan, because the work plan is a new feature of the appraisal process for our senior management team members. But what is so powerful about the work plan is that now you have a strategic tool or a map that you can use to see whether you have achieved those goals or those objectives that you have set. And of course, because it's part of your appraisal, it's going to hold you accountable, and you are going to be responsible that for whatever you put in your work plan, you are going to have to make it happen. So when you meet with your senior, and in the case of a principal, it will be the circuit manager, then you and your supervisor or you and your senior will then, discuss the work plan throughout the year to see whether you are in fact working towards achieving those goals or those objectives. And if you are struggling, then of course you'll have to make certain adjustments in terms of whether you have to revisit whether you haven't perhaps pitched too high and then temper the goal in a sense, or it could be about that you're not really prioritizing those goals, although you have articulated them and identified them, but you are becoming sidetracked. So you and your supervisor will have this amazing roadmap just to help keep you on track. Okay, and that of course applies to the deputy principal's work plan as well, and to the department head's work plan. So in the case of the deputy principal, the principal will be the supervisor or the senior in that partnership, and where your department heads are concerned, the deputy principal or the principal will be the supervisor to help, to mentor, to coach, and to make sure that you are in fact realizing those goals or those objectives that you have set. So it's quite an interesting journey, and I think it's best that you look at the work plan as a tool that you can use, and that will be there just to make sure that you do not become distracted, because there are so many things happening and you're going to take your eye off the ball. So when you feel that you're taking your eye off the ball, and because it's part of your appraisal, the work plan should become a living document, something that will keep you focused, keep your eye on the ball, keep you make sure that you are prioritizing those goals or those objectives that you have set for yourself. So that is sort of just an introduction. I want to go straight to the work plan and then work through one or two performance standards, just to see if I can help to make you see that the work plan must not be a paper exercise. It mustn't just be a document that you must do because you are compelled to do it. It's a compliance exercise, and then you're going to file it. I'd really like our senior management team members to use this strategic mini roadmap, if you will, to help you to see whether you are making progress as a leader at the school or not, and whether you are in fact helping to advance the standard of education at the school, because you are being far more focused perhaps by having a work plan that can be a reference tool just to make sure that you are on track. Okay, so let's go to the work plan, and let me talk through the work plan with you. And then if you have questions, obviously you can always drop that afterwards for me, and I'll see if I can respond. So yes, this is School Corridor, and I'm Sharon, and on the School Corridor channel we talk about leadership and management issues. We talk about well-being, and we also explore tech tools that you can use to improve the work that you're doing at the school, and the service that you are currently offering, and of course to help you just be far more productive and have a far more fulfilling time while you are being a leader, leading not only your teachers and your support staff, but also leading the learners, so that at the end of the day, all the learners can be wonderfully educated, well-balanced, competent young people who can use the stepping stone that you've put in place to make them fly higher. Okay, so let's dive straight into the work plan. So here you have the QMS work plan for the principal, post level 4. There's the year, and then of course Annexure D1. And by now, I'm sure you all know that all the Annexure Ds refer to the documents that apply to the principal. Okay, so let's just look at performance standards. We've already spoken about the performance standards, that there are 7 performance standards. Let's run through that quickly. The first performance standard is leading the learning school, and you will see that under the performance standard you have 2 criteria. The first criteria has to do with the actual classroom teaching, so that will not be populated on your work plan, right? There is a special annexure for classroom teaching. And then you have criterion 2, which is support for the learning school. We'll get to choosing an item, but let us just run through this quickly. Then number 2, the performance standard number 2, you have shaping the direction and development of the school, and you have 2 criteria there. First criterion speaks to planning. So if you choose that criterion, planning, then of course you're going to choose one of the items under criterion 1. And should you decide for this appraisal cycle, you're going to choose criterion 2, which is the school governing body and the broader school community, then of course you must choose one of the subsections under that particular criterion. We get to performance standard 3, managing quality and securing accountability. There you can see again you have the 2 criteria. The first one is securing accountability, and the second one is managing the quality of teaching and learning. You choose one for this appraisal cycle. Number 4 speaks about the developing and empowering of yourself and of others. Again, there are 2 criteria. The first criterion deals with staff, and the second one deals with self. So you're going to have to make a choice in terms of which criterion you are going to focus on for this appraisal cycle. Then managing the school as an organization, that is performance standard 5. There you have 3 criteria. The first one speaks to financial management. Is that the one you're going to choose for this appraisal cycle? Or are you going to do criterion 2, which speaks to general institutional management and administration? Or are you going to focus for this appraisal cycle on criterion 3, which is the management of infrastructure? You must make a choice of one of those criterion for the next appraisal cycle. Then we get to performance standard 6, managing human resources, the staff, educator and non-educator staff at your school. And there you have 1 criterion, managing human resources, and of course it just says exactly what I just mentioned now about managing your educators and your non-educators. Then we get to performance standard number 7, which also just has 1 criterion, management and advocacy of extramural activities. And you'll notice that for performance standard 7, you have to choose 4 descriptors, right? So let's go to the key activities. Now, let's say for leading the learning school, all of you must choose criterion 2, support for the learning school, but you can choose one of these sub-criteria to focus on for this appraisal year. Now, there are 7. You must choose one. Now, let's look at them quickly. The first one is enlist the support of parents and community members as partners in learning. Would you like to focus on that for this appraisal cycle? And if you say yes, is that a flagged area? Is that an area that deserves attention? And is that an area that you would like to develop at your school? And of course, everything that I'm asking now applies to all the other items that we're going to run through, right? Second one is communicates with all stakeholders on the academic performance of the school. Number 3 is about learner motivation. Number 4 is about your curriculum management at the school. Number E is about promoting ICT learning at the school. And of course, F speaks to conflict management. So you must make a selection. Now, let's say for our purposes here, as part of our example, I am going to choose B, because B says communicates or provides feedback with all stakeholders on the academic performance of the school. Now, I'm choosing that because when you communicate with the various stakeholders at the school, you need to first of all just know who the stakeholders are, right? And I'm sure we all know that our teachers are the stakeholders, our support staff members are the stakeholders, our governing body is the stakeholder, our parents are the stakeholders, and of course the learners are the stakeholders. So if we have prioritized communication where we want to give feedback to all our stakeholders, then it means that that is an area that deserves attention, right? So I would imagine that the learners are getting regular feedback in terms of getting their assessments timelessly, and that teachers are helping them to see where they are struggling, where their strengths are, and so that they can also take responsibility for their learning. Parents, that you are probably communicating with the parents in terms of the learners' academic performance, because you are going to send your quarterly reports to the parents, and I'm sure that teachers will be liaising regularly with parents when they notice that the children are not doing too well, or when the children are doing well, then they're also communicating that information with the parents. Or that may not be the situation at the school, and that is what you would like to prioritize. Okay? Very importantly, of course, is the communication with your SGB. Now, according to the South African Schools Act, you must give the parents an annual report on the academic performance of the school. And I am fully aware that many schools are not doing that, right? You focus on everything else concerning school organization, but I know that many schools do not do a quarterly report of the learners' academic performance at the school. And so if that is one of the blind spots at your school, then it makes sense to choose that, because it will help you to stay focused, and it will help to remind you that when you're having your SGB meetings, especially your quarterly meetings, that one of the standing items on your agenda will be the report back or the feedback on the academic performance of the learners, right? So once you've cleared that up in your mind, right, what exactly do you want to feed back to your stakeholders? Is it just the one group like your SGBs? Do you want to improve your feedback on the academic performance of learners with your parents? Are you perhaps finding that there are too many gaps, or that you are not liaising regularly with the parents, or about their learners' performance, specific detail about the learners' performance, and you would like to improve in that area? Or are you perhaps not even discussing the academic performance of your learners with the entire staff, and prioritizing that as one of the key conversations that you must have as a staff, so that everybody knows how the learners are progressing as a group, and not just do it at the end of every term where you just give a general overview of how the learners have performed, but you haven't drilled into what exactly is happening, whether you're making progress, whether there's, what are the challenges, and how can you intervene to turn things around. So you really have to apply the SMART technique. In other words, you need to know specifically what part of communication feedback are you targeting, are you focusing on, are you zooming in on for this appraisal cycle, because that could be an area that you have blindsided all the time, and now you want to make it part of your work plan so that everybody can focus on it, and you specifically as the senior leader will spend time trying to bring about a change in that particular area, right? So here are the targets. Now, in the target area, that is where you're going to specify. That is where you're going to give clarity. That is where you're going to be specific so that you know exactly what you're going to do. Right? So, under targets, we could, for example, say, present and discuss the overall academic performance of learners with the SGB as with the SGB, right? If that is one of the targets, then that is very clear. That means, like I mentioned just prior to this, that will help you then also modify your common agenda or your standard agenda that you have, because you may never have included an academic report back to the parents at the quarterly meeting, at the SGB quarterly meeting. So now that also gives you structure, right? You could, of course, include other targets. So you want to present and discuss the overall academic performance of learners with the SGB quarterly. Here we can, yes, perhaps we should just put it in here, quarterly and annually. Okay, be as detailed as you can, because once life gets busy, you may forget, and you go into, there are so many deliverables, so many demands on your time, so that if you just put there that we need to present and discuss the academic performance of the learners, and you're not saying how often you want to do it, then obviously that is not going to stick. It's not going to help to keep you focused. Then, of course, you can choose the item here, the time frame. When do you want to do it? Now, of course, if we are saying it must be done quarterly and annually, then it makes absolute sense to say that we must do it for every single term 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, what are the performance indicators going to be? What are you going to look at to help you know whether this goal is going to be achieved, whether this objective is going to be achieved, whether you are going to reach the outcomes, right? So the first thing is, what can be a performance indicator here? I would say, for example, the one performance indicator is that the present academic reporting becomes added as a standard agenda item on the SGB meeting agenda. Yeah. Okay. So they already, that you can activate almost immediately, because whoever, obviously you'll have standing items on your agenda, and if this was missing on your agenda, immediately this will become part of your SGB agenda, right? And if you mention that you, for example, also want to present and discuss the overall academic performance of learners with the SGB and with the educator staff, then here under the performance indicator, you must also indicate, so how are you going to be able to measure whether you have achieved this target that you have set here. And so, of course, here you again have to mention something that is measurable, something that is specific. So how are you going to report back to the staff, or how are you going to ensure that the staff engages with the learners' results? So you could, for example, say, and I am really just thinking at the top of my head here, all department heads, let's say, all department heads must do data analysis of learner performance and track under performance of all grades in phase. I know it's a bit long-winded, but the point that we're trying to make here is that the more specific you are, the more detailed you are, the better it's going to be when you have to in fact start assessing or analyzing whether you have reached those targets, right? So if all department heads must do data analysis of learner performance and track underperformance of all grades in phases, in the phase, then that specificity helps you to remain focused, right? So you have this laser focus. You're not just asking your department heads to do learner performance analysis, but you're also asking them to track the underperformance of all the grades. And of course you could unpack it more. So the more performance indicators you have, the better it's going to be for you to be able to analyze whether you are making progress, right? So you must try to articulate as much as possible in the performance indicators. You must say, you can even mention what data sources you are expecting the teachers to use. So let's put that down there quickly. Let's record that and say, okay, the data sources that teachers must use when they are reporting on the learner performance, data sources that must be used, and you can then specify the data sources. In other words, are you just asking the teachers to do the analysis of the learner performance every term, or are you going to ask them to do, is it only term performance? Let me type while I'm talking. Is it only term performance data that you're asking for, or are you going to ask them to analyze the assessment data per term? Are you going to ask them to analysis of problem areas that the learners are experiencing? What are you going to expect them to analyze, so that people don't give you generic answers? Say, most of my learners have passed, most of my learners are not doing well, or whatever vague response they're going to give. You must know exactly what do you want to know. Do you want to know how many learners are not achieving? Would you like to know which parts of the curriculum they are struggling with? Then that is what you're going to have to put under the performance indicators. Data sources must be used. What are the data sources that the teachers must use, so that the teachers can then give you the information that you require? Do you want them to give you the data per gender as well? In other words, are they mainly boys not achieving? Are they mainly girls not achieving? You want to know about the learners, the cohort, the age cohort? What exactly do you want to know, so that you can track whether you are really deeply analyzing the learner's performance? Okay, and so we can go into kind of detail. So I would say spend a lot of time thinking of what are the performance indicators, because once you've identified the performance indicators, there may be a situation where you have to provide people with the information, or you're going to have to provide them with the tools to do the kinds of analysis that you want. So bear in mind that whatever performance standard you're going to place there, it may require additional training or additional discussion with the staff, so that they know that when they are busy teaching the learners, that they need to start analyzing all the assessments in terms of the age cohort, in terms of the areas where the learners are really struggling, and what kind of interventions they're doing, whatever information you require. But those performance indicators also give you a stepping stone as to help people to understand what exactly are you looking at, so that they know beforehand and they can start building that into their assessment practices. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So then we get to contextual factors, and of course the contextual factors you can list here. It's contextual factors could be that learner absenteeism, perhaps. Apologies for that. Learner absenteeism could be a contextual factor, which means that perhaps that will help you look at learner attendance and then also work out strategies with your staff on how you can combat that contextual factor. It could be that you have learner absenteeism, you could have a lack of textbooks or teaching and learning support material. Whatever the contextual factor is, should be listed here, not only to tell you that may impact on achieving the targets that you have set, but also alert you to possible areas where you can start intervening so that you can minimize the risk of that contextual factor. Okay, and when we speak about contextual factors, we're not only talking about the socioeconomic contextual factors, or the fact that there are very few teachers at the school, or other operational requirements at the school. It could be something as simple, I want to say, as learner absenteeism and lack of textbooks. So this was now just an attempt to help you see why it's important for you to really think deeply about what you want to focus on. Once you've identified the criterion, what is the key activity that you want to focus on? Why do you want to focus on that? Look at what your targets are, and your targets can be multiple targets that are all interlinked, right? The time frame is pretty straightforward. Is it going to be a once-off where you're just going to monitor something for, say, the first semester, or is it going to be an ongoing process, and then at the end of the year you're going to see whether you have made the necessary adjustments and the necessary progress, and whether you have achieved your goal. Then the performance indicators, I think that is a critical area, because that is the area where you have to map out exactly in a measurable way what are the metrics you're going to look at, what are the indicators that are going to help you measure whether you have achieved those goals. Okay, and then of course your contextual factors. So this is just a snapshot of how you can populate your work plan and make it a workable document, make it a document that speaks to you, and make it a document that could become a conversation piece in your SMT as well as at staff level. Because I think I have mentioned there must be some integration between the principal's work plan, the deputy principal's work plan, and of course the department head's work plan, because you're all serving the same learners, and you all have your school improvement plan with your various goals in there, and the work plans that you have are just focused on aspects of your bigger goals. And you're saying we are flagging these areas, we are flagging these objectives or these goals that we have here, because we would like to start making a difference. We want to see the shift, and we have a full academic year to see whether we can make a difference in this particular area.